EIP caught their imagination and the way it was set up, and so it's so simple and flexible. Depending on the circumstances this year, with harvest coming so early, they'll hopefully get in a lot more catch crops than they normally would. So all going well, we'll have a great catch crop season.
It's great to be back with another Environment Edge podcast, and you're very welcome to the show. Catch crops do exactly as it says in the tin. When sown after the harvest, they mop up nutrients that may otherwise be lost to water over the winter, and also protect soil from erosion, along with multiple other benefits for the land.
As part of the €60 million Water EIP, a catch crop pilot scheme was launched earlier this year to encourage tillage farmers to take on this measure to improve water quality. Teagasc Catchment Coordinator for the Slaney, Neilus Noonan, joins us with an update on the scheme.
I'm Cathal Summers.
And I'm Deirdre Glenn.
Your Teagasc Sustainability Advisors. And we're back for another Environment Edge podcast, number 107. And here we go.
I think we're the most popular people in the country, or have been for the last couple of months, Neilus. You're on today to chat to us about the catch crop measure in the Farming for Water EIP. So could you tell us a little bit about the project that you and another member of staff were involved in establishing?
Yes, we've been very busy this last few months, Deirdre, and we've been able to put out over 1,300 applications for the catch crops pilot, which was hugely exceeded all expectations, and it's going to make a huge difference for water quality all around the country, and particularly in the catchments of concern, which are very high in nitrates, as we know. So it's going to be a huge benefit to the country, we think.
Yeah.
So it's a follow-on from last year's small pilot we had in Castledockrell area of Wexford and in around the Slaney catchment. And we were able to find out from that the work that was done was very successful and was making a difference and is the right measure in the right place. So we were able to conduct research because it was a catchment, an ACP catchment, and we found out that the catch crops were able to soak up as much as 6 times more nitrogen than the control, which was a bare stubble. So that gave us confidence to go ahead and roll it out on a much larger basis. And eventually it became a national pilot this year. So all the high nitrate priority areas were offered the opportunity to join the catch crops pilot. And as we said, we never expected so many to join. So at the moment, those farmers are receiving their acceptance letters and we're ready to go now in a lot of cases, hopefully.
I suppose when I was out walking farms initially under the ASAP programme and there was no money available, it was a little bit prohibitive for farmers to plant the catch crops, or they weren't as in favour of doing it. And now with the money that's available under the catch crop programme, it's a nice little payment as well for doing the right thing.
Correct, and rightly so. Look, it's the seed itself is probably not costly at all, so we're talking about 20-30 euros a bag or an acre, maybe a little bit more depending on the type of seed you get. But it's the cost of time and machinery and diesel and whatever else to sow the crop. That all adds up. So especially if you get a contractor in to do it, that's probably 30 euros an acre. So very suddenly you could be up around 50-60 euros an acre, and depends how much you value your time as well. It's a significant amount of time to do it. So absolutely, farmers should be compensated to do it. We can't expect people to do things like that for nothing. Even though in reality farmers have been doing it off their own bat and without support for years because they know the benefits that are there. So it's a reward for some of those farmers actually to get paid. It's a great thing that they can get paid under this catch crops pilot.
And it's great as well that all these farmers have taken it on board, isn't it? Like 1,300 applications in a short space of time. It just shows that the appetite is out there by farmers to buy into the utilisation of the crops.
For sure, I think the EIP caught their imagination and the way it was set up, and so it's so simple and flexible. It's not something completely new, and so they can, depending on the circumstances this year, with harvest coming so early, they'll hopefully get in a lot more catch crops than they normally would. Like in the last couple of years, we've had some very difficult harvests, very difficult conditions, and cash crops went in very late in a lot of cases, or not at all. So this year is completely different, thankfully. So all going well. We'll have a great catch crop season. No, I don't want to jinx that now, but
Yeah.
without the China flag, no.
yeah, it looks very good at the moment. So hopefully,
I think the element of flexibility within the program, it's not so prescriptive that,
yeah,
there is a little bit of scope or leeway within the program once you get the seed in the ground and it's doing its job.
yeah, it's a small scale. Even at 1,300, it's still small scale in comparison to other major schemes like Acres, which have 50,000 or plus in it. So there is room for flexibility. I think that's greatly appreciated by everybody, especially the farmers.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think that the big focus for you was, and you and ASAP, was all about putting the right measure in the right place, which you mentioned already. And like
yeah,
you mentioned, I remember talking to you halfway through this process, and you were kind of thinking the project think we might get 700 farmers in, and then all of a sudden we're up to 1,300. But that could be a lot of hectares, and be interesting to see when all the sums are done up how many hectares or so on. But a lot of it is very targeted. So it's places like you said where down the Slaney where nitrate might be an issue, or down the southeast where we have trouble to capture that, or maybe where phosphorus is an issue where it's protecting the soil erosion. But I suppose, how did you decide, how a farmer is eligible, or what was the right place for that measure, I suppose?
yeah. Well, I suppose it was the EIP team or Law Pro have an eligibility map called the Nitrates Priority Areas for Action map, and there's a link to that on their website. And you can go in and see and turn on the blue layer, they call it, or the nitrogen priority areas for action map. And that shows the extent of it. And it covers most of the southeast, as you would expect, and even a fair bit of the southwest, heading into Cork, Tipperary, and the Midlands, part of the Midlands, all the way up to Louth and the northeast of the country as well. So if you look at the map, it's covering best part of the eastern half of the country and southern. So heading for 50% of the entire country nearly. And it's, they're the catchments of concern, we call them. And where nitrates is one of the main issues. So as you mentioned there, catch crops do a very good job on nitrogen, but they also do a very good job on phosphorus and sediment as well. And pesticides, everything. I think they're the complete measure, more or less, for water quality. Of all the measures we've 43 in the EIP. I think it's the one that's most effective in covering all the major pollutants or potential issues with nutrients. So it's definitely the right measure in the right place for the catchments map and for the eligibility map.
Yeah, I know obviously the closing date is gone now, so no one can apply for the project now. But so once the farmer had identified that they're in one of the areas, they sent an email into the Waters EIP or into the Teagasc website for it, and then with some details. And then what happened after that? Then what was the steps after, I suppose, the farmer sent her letter of indicating that they're interested in the scheme?
Yeah, well, then it was passed on to the ASAP advisors, the water quality advisors around the country, and there was a number of us got involved in doing the applications, and we submitted applications then to the EIP for approval during the last number of months, and they've been busy working on them. And since the early days of July now, the accepting letters have started to go out, and a huge number have gone out already, and they're still processing. So that's the next steps now, is to hopefully people are starting to get those acceptance letters that applied. If you haven't got it, hold off. If you have your approved acceptance letter, you can start preparing for the catch crop season. But if you haven't got it yet, please hold off, because you need your approval before you can start. So that's the crucial thing. And once you get the letter, then read it very, very carefully. There's only a couple of pages in it, but everything in it is very important. I suppose we have a habit of not reading letters properly, but it's extremely important to read this one, particularly because of the eligibility part of it. There's a QR code link on in the eligibility section of the letter. And that brings you to that map I was talking about a few minutes ago. And the farmer has to determine whether he's eligible or not himself. So he has to go into that map, type in his area code or address, townlands, wherever it'll be, and it will bring you right to field level. And you turn on just the blue layer, we call it, or the nitrogen priority areas box, tick box. Turn off all the other tick boxes on the map. Just go into nitrogen priorities area for action tick box. And then you can go right to field level to see, is the field eligible? And you can zoom in, zoom out. And if it's covered by the blue layer, it's eligible. And if it's clear, you'll see as you zoom in, zoom out. If it's clear, it's not eligible. So that is 100% up to the farmer to determine. With the resources we had are so small, we couldn't do that. And the EIP team can't do that. Their resources are just as small. So it's up to the farmer. And it is quite simple to do. And the map is very, very good. You can zoom right in. And even if just part of a field is eligible, that's fine. The whole field is eligible. But the danger is if the field is in the clear area, and you should be able to see that very, very quickly. That field is not eligible for payment. So the farmer has to make a decision then, do I plant it or not? You know, if you sow it, we cannot pay you. So that will no doubt influence the decision. So that's very important, and that is up to the farmer.
So it was between 0.5 hectares and up to 40 hectares that a farmer was eligible to be paid on this time.
Correct. Last year, the maximum was 20 hectares. So because of the success of the measure, they've doubled that now to 40 hectares or 100 acres.
Okay.
So
okay.
Potentially it's worth up to 9,000 for the measure 6A, we call it, or the longer term measure. I'll be talking a bit more about that. So that's worth 90 euros an acre or 229 a hectare. If you have 40 of those available, that's potentially worth 9,000. So it's a significant amount of money. And
you have two options. You can go in, there's different times. There's an option 6A and an option 6B for farmers.
Yeah, 6A is probably the more popular one, where it's done after the main harvest, we'll call it, or the spring cereals. So that has to be sowed by before the end of August, for the 1st of September, and it stays in the ground until the 1st of January. So that's the 229 euros per hectare, or 90 euros an acre. That's a more popular measure. So the vast majority of tillage farms will go for that measure, and it's the same as acres. That's the same measure as in the acre scheme. But we have a unique measure ourselves, or we call it 6B, or an alternative catch crop that you can sow, and this one is earlier. So this one has to be sowed by the end of July, start of August, and you just have to have it in ground for 2 months only. So for the months of August and September. So by the end of September, start of October, you can replace it with another winter cereal, most likely. So it's often between two winter crops. Winter barley in particular is very suitable to this measure. So we can see all around the country now that a lot of winter barley has been cut and baled, and everything, the bales are starting to come off the fields even. So these farmers are ready to sow right now. And the earlier the cash crop grows in, the better, because it'll soak up more nitrogen the longer it's in the ground. And once they have sowed by the end of this month and keep it in the ground until the end of September, start of October, that's the job done. And they can get 173 euros per hectare for that, or about 70 euros an acre.
They're not allowed to plough though, isn't it? Non-inversion techniques.
Correct, yeah. For either measure, you can't plough. So non-inversion.
And you have to have 2 seed mixes, is it?
Well, yeah, no, the seed, it's very important. Good question. It's the same as acres, the acre scheme. So for most people, that will probably involve going down to the local merchant or co-op, and you can buy up the made-up mixtures in the co-op. They come in hectare packs or 2 hectare packs.
Lovely.
And it doesn't matter what mix you get once it's acres approved. And has two species in it. So look, all the merchants, they follow the acres rules and they're acres compliant. So that's what you ask for down in the co-op, or wherever you buy it, is for an acres compliant seed mixture, catch crop
Okay.
mixture.
Yeah, brilliant to know.
A
Yeah.
job done. Now you can also do the mix yourself, but it gets more complicated then. And as you suggest, there must be at least 2 species in the mix, and the rates then are the same as for acres as well. So there's an appendix that you consult for that, and it's sent with the acceptance letter. So you pick the 2 species off the mix or more, and you mix them in the correct proportions, to achieve the acres compliance. So it's probably best to consult your advisor or a co-op about that. Don't be very sure that your mix is compliant if you're mixing up traits yourself. So just so that you don't get into any bother there with having the right amount of seed or the right mix.
Yeah, I've been asked about it. Yeah, about different mixes and what's eligible and that. So that's good to know.
Just on that, Neilus, I suppose important for farmers that have been growing catch crops the last couple of years before this payment ever came out, if they're in acres, or even before that again, and even if we do it in the next couple of years, probably to not to be sowing the same catch crop over and over and over again. Say, for example, brassica, because maybe potentially to a club root and oilseed rape and the other things.
Absolutely, there's loads of catch crop mixes out there, thankfully, and like you say, there's a non-brassica one which helps with club root. So a lot of farmers will go for that to have brassica crops in the rotation, because they'll want to avoid that at all costs. But there's also grazing mixes as well, and I'll come to that a bit later, or forage mixes. And there's soil conditioner ones as well, where you have no intention of grazing, and they're very good for feeding the next crop and covering the ground and conditioning the soil and breaking up compaction and alleviation problems like that, getting water and air into the soil. So there's lots of choice there. So, and like you say, it's better to mix them up, not to go with the same mix all the time.
And keep your buffers.
Correct. Yeah. Coming to that now as well. But
Good man.
Just before we leave the seed, there are a small number of organic farmers that joined the scheme this year as well, and we're delighted to see that. But they have to be very careful with the seed. They have to source organic catch crop seed. So they can't use the normal seed unless they're able to get derogation from their organic association, and they would need to apply for that immediately, because that'll take some time and they don't want to leave it too long. But under normal circumstances, they have to use organic catch crop seed, and there's only a couple of places in the country that do that, and they'd be aware of that anyway. But just very important that they don't use the normal seed unless they have prior approval to do that.
And just before we leave the sowing aspect of it, I've heard you saying before, and a number of asset advisors and Catchment coordinators saying that, I know the date is the end of July before the 1st September for the spring or for the crops, but the earlier you get them in the ground, obviously the better impact. And I suppose the second part of that question is, how is it verified? Like how is a farmer tracked if, when they actually put it in the ground, or what are the rules looking for? Is it just receipts or?
Yeah, look, there again, the acceptance letter details it very well, and there's a QR code. Again, there's actually 2 QR codes on the acceptance letter, one on each side of a 2-sided page, and one is to the declaration. There's an online declaration form for when everything is done, and that's a month after the deadlines for sowing. So the deadline for sowing for the Measure 6B, or the short-term one, is that must be sowed by the 1st of August. And then you must have your declaration form in a month after that, so it's the 1st of September. And for the later sown one then, that you have to have sown by the end of August, 1st September, you have until the 1st of October to submit that declaration. So the link is there and it's online. And it's reasonably straightforward, an e-signature, and you attach just a map of the area you sowed, and you declare what parcels you sowed on the online declaration. And you keep your seed dockets then on file at home in case you get inspected or someone asks for them, but you don't submit them. So just a map of the area sown, and the declaration form, which includes the parcels that you sow on the area. So that'll determine how much area you have eligible for payment.
So big warning then to farmers. It's a good payment. What you're asking for is not a huge amount of administration, but important to get it done to make sure they get that payment down, because it'd be a shame to miss
Absolutely.
something in that letter and not do it. It's just a matter of spending a tiny bit of time on it. But it's not onersome, I think, what you're asking for anyway.
No. The most important thing is, I suppose, that the farmer's calendar at home, stick that date into it, the date for sowing deadline and the date for the declaration. Two big red stars on the calendar for those dates, and the week before, ideally, if they can manage it, being plenty of time.
Well, so far it sounds like a fantastic scheme, Neilus, but are there any pitfalls, or is there anything that the farmers should be looking out for?
Absolutely, for sure. Look, every scheme is the same, and we've so many schemes now. It's actually the interaction between all the schemes is often the problem now. You could have something in a scheme that causes a problem for another scheme inadvertently. We see that all the time. So you have to, if you're involved in multiple schemes, you have to be aware of the regulations for each one.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't help one another, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, like acres and certain measures within the EIP that can't be done within an acre's parcel, or there's other ones that can be done within it.
For sure,
yeah. So there's a knock-on effect if you don't know the ramifications for it.
Yeah, just as you mentioned, acres, like the catch crops measure is very popular in the acre scheme as well. So the first thing there straight away is dual funding. So if a farmer is already in acres sowing catch crops and getting paid for them, obviously those parcels cannot be funded by us, by the EIP as well.
Yeah.
So it has to be different fields, different parcels to the acres. And that's fair enough. Obviously, everyone will understand that. But it's very important that the farmers don't mix them up. Like with acres, you have to declare those parcels, those fields every year in your BIS. So that's predetermined. So the farmers already know what fields they have in for acres. So it's whatever is left over then for the EIP is the way it works. The acres is a heavily regulated scheme and very tight in terms of you have to nominate your fields. So that's the number one thing for the farmer for catch crops if he's in the acre scheme, sow them first, or well, not necessarily first. Actually, they have a couple of weeks later to do the acres ones. They have until mid-September, whereas our ones have to be 2 weeks earlier.
Right.
But they have to avoid at all costs putting our EIP crops, catch crops, into those acres fields. So you must know the difference.
There's rules around the grazing as well of them, isn't there? The catch crops.
Yeah, just before I move on to that, sorry, Deirdre, is conditionality is another issue with catch crops or crop diversification. So if farmers are trying to avoid the 2 and 3 crop rule, and that's sometimes the case in areas where a lot of farmers just sow the one crop, say malt and barley in particular. So they might look for an exemption from the 2 or 3 crop rule. And to get that, normally they have to sow half the cereal area in catch crops. And so because they're doing that 50% area is not eligible for the EIP either. So that's already covered under conditionality, and crop diversification or equivalence is another name for it. So that ground is not eligible. So it's important to realise that as well. And even another rule then as well is the geese and swans aspect of the acre scheme. Now that's usually around the coastal areas, and some farmers will be familiar with this. If the geese and swans area has qualified them for acres and are getting paid for that under the acre scheme, they cannot use our catch crops in those areas either. So under normal circumstances, they have to either sow a winter crop or have a catch crop in the ground until the 1st of March in those geese and swans areas. So in either case, can they use EIP catch crops there? So these were the interactions between the schemes can sometimes be a problem. And if you're in acres, our trying to avoid the two or three crop rule or have the geese and swans measure on your farm, be very careful with our EIP crops, catch crops, and consult your advisor is probably the best thing, just to make sure that you're not going to have anything to watch out for there, any potential problem.
I think the farmers, definitely tillage farmers, I've been finding are very, very well informed of the rules and regs. They're very up to speed with them.
They are very sharp. Yeah. But then, it can happen very easily as well if you're in a rush, and because we've up to 40 hectares now, it's very attractive. So we don't want anyone to get caught out with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it is a busy time of year for tillage farmers. They're flat in the mat now at the moment, so from now on in,
other potential pitfalls. The number one is the eligibility. Like I said, the farmer needs to establish that themselves. We haven't done that for them, so they need to go onto that blue map, and the link is there on the acceptance letter. Go and see that your field is eligible. Do not assume that it is. There's parts of nearly every county that are not eligible. The only counties that I can think of that are completely eligible are Kilkenny and Carlow. Nearly every other county has parts of it that are not eligible. So until you know, do not assume that the field is eligible. So that's the number one thing. And another issue can be the field that obviously has to be under a BIS application. So unless it's on your BIS application, it can't be paid to you. So that can be relevant sometimes as well. If it's on a relative's farm or whatever, it's just a relative that has to apply and have approval for the EIP, and if he or she doesn't, that field is not eligible. There's another cultivated stubbles rule as well, where your cereal area, 20 to 25% of your cereal area has to be left uncultivated stubbles for wild foraging birds. And this is something that doesn't always come to the forefront. You wouldn't hear a lot of talk about, but we don't want the EIP catch crops impinging on that rule. So under normal circumstances, you leave that 20 to 25% as untouched stubbles for the birds over the winter. And we certainly don't. We're not in competition with that. We don't want to cause trouble for wild birds, or that measure is an extremely good measure.
It's yellow hammers, I think, is it? At the bird, is it? Yeah.
Absolutely. So they're endangered species in a lot of cases, and we don't want to cause trouble for that. Now, it is referenced on the acceptance letters as well. Like some people, you can override that if you catch crop the entire area and leave no stubbles. If you have the entire area either as winter cereals or catch crops or late harvested crops, you can override that rule. But be very careful. If you leave any stubbles at all, you're into that 20 to 25% rule. And if you drop below it, you're potential there for penalties or trouble. So be very, very careful, and maybe consult with your advisor if needs be in that case. And our preference is that you respect that 20 to 25% rule. Like this, it's a good rule. And it's the Department of Agriculture rule for BIS and for cross compliance. So it has to be complied with. So it's another potential pitfall that's possibly there.
Yeah, and Neilus, maybe just to finish off on the potential pitfalls, maybe go through the grazing rules quickly. Not that I'm a massive fan of grazing in the middle of the winter, but maybe you go through the rules of it. Yeah,
look, it's covered under cross compliance as well. So if you are intending to graze the catch crops, you must leave a 4-meter margin all around the field. That's the first thing. So that's to protect the margins and drains and streams or whatever else from sediment loss. And another important factor is you must have a 30% lieback. So for example, if you have 10 acres of a 10-acre field, you must have, you can only sow, say, 7 acres catch crop, and you must have a 30% lieback for sheep or cattle or whatever it is to come back to. And no intensive or strip grazing, zero grazing, etc. So the requirements are quite stringent there. And I suppose that the practice had been very popular up to recent years until those rules came in, and there has been quite a step back from it in recent times. So, and for that reason, I think, and it is very important that if you sow catch crops, even outside the EIP for any reason, you're straight into those rules of 30% liebacks and 4-meter margins and no intensive or strip grazing, etc.
Yeah, it protects the land much better, and even that, like you mentioned, not to be grazing it to the soil, like that's a disaster when you're in the middle of the winter for erosion. And I suppose the big question for farmers to finish off is, how does the farmer get paid at the end of it? When does the money come in, or how does it come into him?
Yeah, well, look, because the main measure, the 6A, has to stay in the ground until the 1st of January, they can't be paid until after that. But last year they were paid quite quickly. It was in the middle of February, I think, and hopefully this time it might even be sooner. So I suppose that's to be expected. If the measure has to stay there until the 1st of January, they can't pay out until after that. Now, the other one should be quicker because the requirement is it stays there until the 30th of September, start of October. So potentially that can be paid on before the end of this year, all going well, and well before it, hopefully. Now, look, that's up to the EIP team, Law Pro, to do that, so I can't really speak for them, but I think that's their intention.
Yeah, so winter cropping you might have for Christmas, and spring cropping you might have it for Valentine's Day. That's what you're telling me.
Yeah, all going well. Anyway.
All going well. Yeah. Look, Neilus, thanks a million for the update. I know we've been getting a lot of calls, and there's a lot of farmer interaction over the last couple of months, and you're doing a savage job. And what you've done is admirable. Like that was a huge volume of work that came at you in the last couple of months. So fair play to yourselves in the team. And I think it's like you said, it's going to be very impactful. Particularly, like we're down, you're in the Slaney Catchment coordinator. I'm from Wexford, so we know that there's nitrate issues in that river, and this can't be but a positive measure in the area.
Yeah, look, the nitrate loading is 50% too high in the Slaney, and it's actually worse in the Barrow. I think it's 57% in the Barrow. The nitrogen loads need to go down by that much to be within the parameters. So it's extremely important in the Slaney and Barrow catchments, but important in every nitrates catchment. Any nitrogen loading above even 1% can lead to a problem in the estuary, and that's where our main problems are all over the country, is in the estuaries. The rivers actually are able to cope quite well with nitrates. It's the accumulation of the nitrates all the way down along those rivers, and by the time they reach the harbours and the estuaries, there's algal blooms occurring because of all the nitrate accumulation, and it's causing serious issues for water quality in that instance. So we have to work all the way back up the rivers to solve that problem. And the catch crop measure is ideal. And it's the co-benefits are it's not just for soaking up nutrients. There's also benefits for soil condition and improving the land and giving a little bit of nitrogen to the next crop. So the farmers, I don't need to go into much detail at all. They already know this, and they'll see it more and more. The more cash crops they sow, the better it is for the land. So there's multiple benefits. So it's great that it's not just water quality. We're ticking loads of boxes.
All boxes, yeah. I think that's a great way to finish up. And look, I suppose just thanks a million for the update. And all we're looking for now is a decent harvest, and hopefully the weather plays ball. And then we look forward to see those fields of catch crops across the country in the middle of the winter. Thanks a million, Liz. We'll chat again to you soon.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Deirdre.
So there you have it. Tune in next time to hear more interesting chats and discussion.
Myself and Deirdre will be back in 2 weeks' time, but do give us a review on Apple and Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening to the Environment Edge podcast.